In the year 61 BCE, Ariovistus, the leader of the Suebi tribe and a king from the Germanic people, resumed his tribe's migration from eastern Germania to the Marne and Rhine regions. This migration encroached on the land of the Sequani, but they still sought Ariovistus' allegiance against the Aedui. As a reward for his victory at the Battle of Magetobriga, the Sequani granted Ariovistus with land. Ariovistus then proceeded to settle the land with 120,000 of his people. However, when 24,000 Haruds joined his cause, he demanded that the Sequani provide him with more land to accommodate them. This demand raised concerns in Rome because if the Sequani conceded, Ariovistus would become powerful enough to take control of all their land and then attack the rest of Gaul. Diviciacus, the leader of the Aeduan government and the representative of the Gallic delegation, voiced his apprehension regarding Ariovistus' military victories and his taking of hostages. Diviciacus strongly urged Caesar to take action against Ariovistus and put an end to the looming threat of a Germanic invasion. He warned that if no action was taken, the Aedui would be forced to abandon their land and seek refuge elsewhere. The situation presented a unique opportunity for Caesar. Not only did he have a moral obligation to protect the Aedui, but he could also use this as a chance to expand the borders of the Roman Empire, instill loyalty among his army, and establish himself as a formidable commander of Rome's army beyond its borders. By defeating Ariovistus, Caesar could cement his legacy and secure the safety of the Aedui people, who had been long-standing allies of Rome. In 59 BCE, the Senate had honored Ariovistus with the title of King and Friend of the Roman people. This made it difficult for Caesar to declare war against the Suebi tribe, as he did not want to go against the Senate's decision. However, Caesar could not ignore the suffering of the Aedui and decided to confront Ariovistus. Caesar demanded that Ariovistus must not allow any Germanic tribesmen cross the Rhine, and that he must return the Aedui hostages and protect the Aedui and other friends of Rome. Despite Ariovistus' assurance that the Aedui hostages would be safe as long as they continued to pay tribute, he refused to recognize Rome's authority over his actions. The situation escalated when the Haruds attacked the Aedui, and reports indicated that around 100 clans of Suebi were attempting to cross the Rhine into Gaul. With this, Caesar had the justification he needed to wage war against Ariovistus in 58 BCE. Ariovistus was a skilled general, and he knew that Vesontio was the key to the strategic Doubs Valley. He marched towards it with his army, but Caesar, who probably had intelligence from the Gauls, had already arrived there and established a main base. However, Caesar's own men were gripped by a panic, having heard that the Germans were superior warriors. To address this, Caesar called a meeting with his centurions and berated them for not following orders and causing unnecessary confusion. He then delivered a powerful speech in which he called on his men to fulfill their duty, threatened to march early the next morning with only the 10th Legion, and praised their valor. This speech had the desired effect, arousing fanatical loyalty in the 10th and igniting shame and a spirit of rivalry in the others. Vesontio, located approximately 121 kilometers away from the Rhine. Ariovistus had already become aware of the Roman presence in the area, and thus he ceased his march and waited for them. With the help of Diviciacus, Caesar's troops managed to cover a distance of 80 kilometers in 7 days, probably reaching the vicinity of Belfort. Despite the slow pace of 11 to 12 kilometers per day, the army relied on Diviciacus to navigate through open country, which suggests that there were no proper Roman roads between Besancon and Belfort at that time. Caesar himself took a detour to avoid enclosed areas, most likely traveling west of the Doubs through the lands of his Celtic allies. Ariovistus dispatched messengers to Julius Caesar, who was marching towards the Rhine, indicating his willingness to negotiate and hold a conference. Caesar, who was well known for his conciliatory approach towards adversaries, believed that Ariovistus was beginning to see reason. It was decided that the two leaders would meet on horseback, accompanied only by their cavalry. Caesar arrived with his trusted horsemen from the 10th Legion, who lightheartedly remarked that they had been elevated to the rank of knights, a nickname, equistris, that would stay with them for generations to come. The encounter between the two leaders on a raised hill between their respective camps, with their bodyguards stationed a few hundred yards away, was a rare occurrence in the history of diplomatic talks. It provided an opportunity for both parties to express their viewpoints directly without any outside interference. Caesar focused on the policies of Rome, while Ariovistus claimed that the Aedui had attacked him first. He also argued that the official friendship between Rome and his people was a mere facade and prophesied that he could gain genuine support from many influential Romans by killing Caesar. Furthermore, Ariovistus contended that Gaul should be governed by its own laws and be free from foreign rule. As the German cavalry began to hurl projectiles, Caesar had to retreat to his bodyguards for safety. The following day, Ariovistus invited Caesar to another meeting, but Caesar, mistrusting the Germans, sent two subordinates, Gaius Valerius Procillus and Marcus Medius, in his place. Unfortunately, they were captured and put in chains while Ariovistus was in the process of moving his army forward. In the coming days, Ariovistus made a tactical move by shifting his base to a location just 2 miles away from Caesar's camp. He cleverly camouflaged his movement by deploying cavalry skirmishes. The Germanic tribes had a unique set of armed forces that consisted of cavalry and an equal number of light infantry. These soldiers provided support to the cavalrymen, either individually or in groups during combat. Caesar's men, on the other hand, stood firmly in a battle formation outside the walls of their camp each day, but only minor skirmishes ensued. As days passed, Ariovistus, from a distance of 2 miles, successfully disrupted Caesar's supply line, leaving his garrison in complete isolation. According to historical accounts, Caesar attributed the Germanic army's decision to withhold a full-scale attack to the guidance of their wise women's divinations, which advised them to wait until the new moon. However, some experts suggest that this explanation may not be entirely accurate and that there were other factors at play. It's believed that Ariovistus had surrounded Caesar's camp and had stationed soldiers on a nearby hill, which blocked the gate for provisions. Essentially, Ariovistus was attempting to cut off Caesar's supplies and wear him down through a siege. Recognizing that he was outnumbered, Caesar realized that his sole recourse was to launch an offensive. He had to compel the Germans to engage in combat or risk being besieged into submission. With a light defense left behind in camp, Caesar led his troops forward in a 3-line formation and approached the German camp from a distance of 550 meters. The first 2 lines provided protection, while the third constructed a new camp where Caesar stationed 2 legions and auxiliaries. The remaining 4 legions returned to the main camp. Hindsight makes it tempting to suggest that Ariovistus should have attacked the 2 lines while the reserve was busy building, or targeted the 4 legions while they were separated from the others. However, the outcome of battles is never certain, regardless of the odds. The following day, Caesar cleverly utilized the auxiliaries from the forward camp as cover, while he strategically arranged all 6 of his rested and well-fed legions in formation. Each tribune took personal charge of 1 legion, while the quaestor oversaw the 6th. Caesar intended for the entire senior command to be present, ensuring that the soldiers understood that they were being closely monitored and that their leaders would face the same consequences as they did. With their sights set on the weakest aspect of the Germanic force, their open camp, the men began a steady advance. According to Caesar, the enemy's defenses were bolstered by a wagon train positioned behind their ranks, leaving them with no other choice but to fight or flee. As the sun cast its golden rays over the battlefield, the tension between the Roman legions and the Germanic tribes reached its zenith. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and anticipation as the 2 mighty forces stood ready to clash. Julius Caesar's steely gaze fixed on the enemy lines. His men, disciplined and battle-hardened, awaited his command with bated breath. Across from them, the Germanic tribes, fueled by a fierce sense of pride and determination, braced themselves for the impending clash. The Romans, following their established tactics, positioned themselves with 2 units forward and 1 in reserve. Caesar knew the importance of a strong initial charge, and without hesitation, he ordered his men to advance against the perceived weakest part of the Germanic line, the left flank. The Germanic forces, known for their speed and ferocity, responded with a swift and overwhelming charge. The Romans barely had time to hurl their pila before the fight descended into a brutal melee of swordplay. Amidst the chaos, emotions ran high on both sides. The Romans fought with determination, their disciplined formation allowing each man to wield his weapon effectively. The Germans, however, formed into a phalanx, pushing forward with sheer brute force. As the battle raged on, the Romans found themselves pushed backward, their lines bending but not breaking. Caesar, leading from the front, urged his men to stand firm, rallying them with his unwavering courage and resolve. The clash of steel, the shouts of commanders, and the cries of the wounded created a symphony of war that echoed across the battlefield. The Romans, refusing to yield ground, resorted to desperate measures, jumping up on the shields of their enemies to thrust downward and disrupt the Germanic phalanx. The tide of battle ebbed and flowed, each side gaining ground only to lose it again in the relentless struggle. Both Romans and Germans fought with a mix of fear, adrenaline, and determination, their emotions driving them to push beyond the limits of exhaustion. From his vantage point atop his horse, Publius Licinius Crassus, a skilled cavalry officer, quickly assessed the situation and took decisive action by ordering the third line of battle to support the Roman left. This proved to be a pivotal moment as the Romans gained the upper hand on that side. Although this type of decision typically made by higher-ranking officers, but Crassus' quick thinking earned him well-deserved accolades after the battle and likely set him on a path towards rapid advancement. The enemy line was shattered and fled towards the Rhine, a distance of 24 kilometers, with the Roman cavalry in hot pursuit, even chasing down fleeing women. A few individuals, including Ariovistus, were able to cross the river using boats or swimming. However, the remaining individuals were met with Roman cavalry and experienced heavy casualties, including Ariovistus's wives and one of his daughters. Another daughter was taken captive. Fortunately, both of Caesar's emissaries were unharmed and were able to recount their perilous encounter with the Germans who deliberated in front of them whether to incinerate them immediately or later. The Suebi had initially planned to cross the Rhine, but ultimately changed their minds. As they retreated, the Germanic tribes that had joined them turned against them and attacked. The Suebi lost the ability to launch any offensive, and they took refuge in the Black Forest for some time afterwards. It's unlikely that Ariovistus retained any position in the Suebi's citizen army after his escape, and he was said to have died in 54 BC, causing indignation among the Germans. With the left bank of the Rhine now free, Caesar launched a campaign against the Belgae and met them in battle at Exona in 57 BCE.